9 months ago, I got my hands on an original Sinclair ZX Spectrum, a 48K model with rubber keys and the pretty black case. It's a true icon of 8-bit British home computing from the 1980s. I had a great time recreating the golden era of home computing and playing some classic games that I remember from my childhood. Now I've got some new toys to play with, a whole new old Spectrum to try out, and new games to play. Let's start with this plastic bag. It contains a divMMC expansion from The Future Was 8-bit. It comes in a neat black box with a Spectrum decal that nicely matches the computer's case. On the back there's a joystick port and a slot for an SD card from which I can load many games and other programs. I also opted for the pre-loaded SD card. I'm not sure exactly what's on here at the moment. You also get a nicely written and easy to follow instruction page. Now back when I first fired up my Spectrum, I had real trouble tuning a telly into it, so I looked at external display options so I didn't have to do anything to the internals or the lovely case. The ZX HD required some self-assembly, but that didn't take too long and the results were pretty impressive. You get a crisp HDMI output and even an upgraded colour palette for any software that supports it. The only thing is that you have a box hanging out of the back of the computer, but the designers were smart enough to include a through port so you can plug in other stuff into the back of it. And that's going to be useful now because I have my beloved HDMI video output and the divMMC expansion all connected together in sweet harmony. Once connected, it all feels very solid and looks like it's supposed to go together. You just need to pop in the memory card and you're ready to go. The joystick port supports Atari style 9-pin joysticks. I'm not a joystick fan, but this modern retro gamepad is ideal for me. So with all this stuff connected to each other, will it actually work? You start off with the HDMI startup screen and then reset to the standard Sinclair copyright message. The two buttons on the div unit are an unlit reset button and a lit menu button. Pressing the menu button brings up a rather dry directory listing, but it is easy to navigate using the Spectrum's cursor keys or my gamepad. You can see that the card has other stuff apart from ZX, including titles for Commodore computers. It doesn't take long to find something interesting, including recent titles published by The Future Was 8-bit. In fact, there are a lot more recent games on this supplied card, more so than the classic games you might remember. The ZX folder has most of what we're interested in, and that has titles grouped into alphabetical folders. Just navigate down to the file to run. There's also a TFW8B folder in the root which has the 699 range of games for a variety of machines. Again, there's a ZX folder here. And here's a quick montage of some of those games. If you want to add your own games to the card, that's easy enough. Switch off your Spectrum first, then take the SD card out and plug it into your PC. Find some Spectrum files from a reputable source. TAP format files seem to work best. In the ZX folder of the SD card, I made a new folder. I called it -downloads. I used the minus character to put it above other items in the listing. Then I copied my files or folders of files into the new downloads folder. Now eject the SD card and put it back in your div slot. Power up the Spectrum and press the div menu button. In my ZX folder, I now have a lovely downloads folder at the top of the list with the files ready to play. Now there are some modern Spectrum games that take advantage of the ULA Plus circuitry included in the ZX HD box, and some of them are included in the SD card I've got here. But a lot of those games also have 128K versions, and my Spectrum only has 48K. Back in the 8-bit era, memory became cheaper and the demand from users, particularly gamers, became higher. But because 8-bit processors tend to have a 16-bit address bus, they can only access 64K at a time. The screen and operating system and basic interpreter will take up some of that space too. So manufacturers came up with a system of switching banks of memory. The processor could still only access 64K at any one time, but in total developers could access more, which was particularly useful in switching in data, or great if you wanted bigger screen modes. Sinclair did this with the 128K Spectrum Plus 2, and I have one here. Amstrad now own the rights to the Spectrum, and the Plus 2 is not as pretty as the original. It's a bit boxy and dull to my eyes, but it does have some notable functional advantages over the original design. Firstly, it has a more usable keyboard. It's not as good as some of its rivals, but much better to use than the rubber keys. It also has a built-in tape deck so you don't have to connect one up and mess around with volume controls and cables, and you had a separate audio output. One very useful feature for today is that it has an RGB output, which means, with the right cable, you can connect directly to any TV or via a relatively inexpensive generic HDMI adapter. And it does work, but the quality of the picture I got wasn't that good, and the thing is, I want to use my ZX HD if I can, because it should give me a crisper picture and has the ULA Plus graphics. So let's see if I can connect this up to a Plus 2 to get a better picture. Now I've got my Plus 2 working, I'd like to check out the tape deck by indulging in something I've wanted to do for quite a while. My ultimate three-way. I say. That's right, I've got 3 of my favourite 1980s Spectrum games from Ultimate Play the Game on original tapes. To be honest, Lunar Jetman is the one I'm least familiar with, but the other 2 are great. I'm going to start with Lunar Jetman. For the sake of nostalgia, I'm going to show a bit of the tape loading process. I'll only do this up to the loading screen and only for the first of the 3 games. If I'm honest, I don't really know what I'm doing with Lunar Jetman. You fly around a horizontally scrolling landscape, and I think you have to pick things up and put them in the buggy while fighting off pesky aliens. I do have the instructions, but I'm still not entirely sure what's going on. It does show Ultimate's quirky cartoon graphic style, which, to me, was one of the most interesting features of their early games and works so well on the Spectrum. On to Atic Atac, which may be my very favourite 8-bit game of all time. I like the fact that you can choose your character. The simple cartoon characters are done so well, and the controls are really responsive. I love the multi-floor exploration and the top-down view, with lower floors feeling more cellar-like. The roast chicken on the right shows your health, and if it gets down to a bare carcass you lose a life, but if you find food it replenishes. As a knight I can walk through clocks like they're doors. You have to find the correct colour key to get through locked doors, and ultimately all the pieces to a big key to escape the house. At the end you get a percentage completed as well as a score, which is a nice touch. Jetpack, in my opinion, is one of the few unique arcade-style games made for a home computer that stood up to the real arcade games of the time. It has a lot in common with Lunar Jetman, but it's brilliantly simple. You put together your rocket from the 3 pieces, then fuel it. All the time you're fighting off increasingly angry and weirdly shaped aliens. Once you've fully fueled your rocket, you get in to escape to the next level. Once you've completed a few levels, you get a new ship to construct. In this case, it looks very much like the space shuttle. And that completes my first 3-way on video. If you enjoyed it as much as I did, then please do press that like button and subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. Now I'm going to connect the div and the ZX HD because I want to try a game from the SD card that uses 128K and the ULA Plus extended graphics. There's a game called Nixy the Glade Sprite that I've seen as listed as a 128K ULA Plus game, and I really want to give it a go, especially as there's a non-ULA Plus version I can compare it to. Although I do feel a bit of a fool as a grown man saying Nixy the Glade Sprite. If we look at the standard graphics version, it still looks good, really good for a Spectrum game. But you can clearly see the palette hasn't got the depth of the ULA Plus version. So ULA Plus really does make a big difference. There are some great games that have been released in the past few years. Here's Dizzy 8 Wonderful Dizzy, released in 2020. Again, the graphics and sound are amazing for a Spectrum. We can see that the quality of game graphics on the Spectrum has come a long way since 1982. I love some of the classic older games, but I'm blown away by what's been achieved by developers who continue to support the Spectrum. There's a real charm to the simple, high contrast, brightly coloured bitmap graphics that takes me back to being a kid again, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The divMMC expansion and the Future Was 8-bit SD card provide a great path to modern retro gaming on the Spectrum. I expect a lot of these games are now played on emulators, either on PCs or Raspberry Pi based modern hardware. There's a retro games unit about to come out in time for Christmas, for example. I get that, the original hardware is now 40 years old and has to be treated with care. But the hardware I've been playing with here comes at a cost. The ZX HD, divMMC and a modern retro gamepad will cost you about £200 if you buy it all new. That doesn't include the cost of a Spectrum to attach it to if you don't happen to own one already. Having said that, if you've got a soft spot for the old hardware, like I have, you're going to have great fun with this lot. I hope you enjoyed the video because I had a lot of fun making it. Thanks for watching, cheers!